Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and welcome to another video about Linux from scratch. That's right, folks, it's another Linux from scratch i3 video by Das. You won't believe it, but about 5 to 10 minutes after last week's video, when I was discussing about how difficult it was for me to try to get some of KDE's games up and running because of the KDE background infrastructure that was required to be built just to get certain things like Sudoku or Mahjong working. I figured it out. And if we take a quick look, voila, we have Key Sudoku working perfectly. I've played a few games. It works great. I no longer have that blank screen that I had before. If we say a new game, for instance, yeah, we want to restart a new game. We've got all these options for games. It's wonderful. And then for Mahjong, if we go there real quick, ta-da! We've got K Mahjong. Everything's great. It's got all the workings. It's good. Anyway, you say, Das, what'd you do wrong? What'd you screw up? Well, this is the problem that I have. The way that Linux from scratch has you set up the system, and they specifically have you build everything with a prefix of /user instead of the default for most distributions being /user local. If you were not to change the way you build your packages, by default, I believe most everything will default with /user local. And so a lot of the things that I had built with KDE, since I did it outside of Linux from scratch documentation, and the reason why is I wasn't looking to build KDE for Linux from scratch. I wasn't planning on running KDE from scratch. My ultimate goal in that project was to see how difficult it is when you want an application for a different desktop manager to run in your current window manager. What is the bare minimum that you have to install for the infrastructure for that application so that you can run it? In this case, as I spoke about last week, it is a lot. Oh, I practically feel like I installed everything but except for maybe the last little bit of KDE just to make these little programs work. I was thinking, yeah, I'll install a KDE library, a few graphics disks, however it manipulates that, and then it'll make the program work because that's all the background it really needs. I was wrong. It required most of the K libraries and most of the K packages. I must have installed at least 20, 30 packages. And yet KDE still isn't fully installed because you cannot do a start KDE and have a GUI interface. In fact, I'm still missing start KDE. So there are still a lot of Plasma applications that need to be built if I were to decide to go and check out and say, yeah, look at me, I'm all that. I got a KDE version of a desktop manager and Linux from scratch. And I'm not really wanting to do that. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to see what I really needed just to get that running. Now, I also mentioned about how I went the GNOME route for, say, GNOME's Mahjong version and their games that are out there. And what I was running into with that was that the the GNOME library was missing, which everything kept pointing me back to GDK3 and uh, a few other packages. And what that really was doing was leading me down, I like to use the phrase, the rabbit hole, to the point where it was pointing me to degraded, or I should say obsolete packages within the GNOME 2 libraries. For some reason, some of that stuff was being still looked at. And I don't know if I could have gotten around it And yes, I probably could have followed the instructions in LFS to install the whole entire GNOME desktop environment so that those things would work. But I really wanted just to figure out how to get those one or two applications. And I'm very, very, very happy. Sudoku and Mahjong are my two biggest time wasters when I'm just sitting there trying to kill time, trying to just mindlessly think about things. I love matching games, and that's what I love about Mahjong, trying to find the matches, and it adds that bit of interest, uh, that difficulty of not only finding the pairs, but also knowing the better order or best order to remove them in so that you can remove all the tiles and try to get to a blank screen. Now, one thing I do miss is there was one version of Mahjong that I used to use all the time that had the capability of reshuffle the current tiles. So it's probably a cheaty thing to do because if you do it right, you could reshuffle, and then eventually you could always clear out the entire game set. But that's not about what this is about. I have gotten those things working. I'm very happy. I've gotten things such as I talked about last week how I was working on LibreOffice. And so I have LibreOffice 5 running proper and everything working. Now, this was a lot of compiling to get this to work, but the instructions for LFS are so good. I can't reiterate that enough for everybody out there just listening. And yeah, if you can read a book, if you can follow instruction, what they have done for LFS and what they have tested works so well. Now, you say, Das, have you run into any problems? Have you done things badly? Because I said, I'm going to run LFS until I break it. Honestly, I'm quite surprised I haven't broken it yet. Now, I have done some things that have, one, destroyed my networking, so it stopped working, fixed. I have broke, so some of my hardware stopped working, such as my mouse no longer functioning in i3 or in XFCE when I was building i3. That happened, but I was able to fix it very easily with the Xorg XF86 drivers and reinstalling those. I don't know what caused that to break. I mean, just reinstalling pretty much the mouse driver fixed that problem. Very simple fix. I have broken Perl. I have broken Python, mainly because Perl and Python have some great third-party applications that allow you to install bits and pieces and modules and so forth, and it automates that for you very easily between CPAN for one and pip for the other. And sometimes if you're not careful with automated tools, you can destroy things. For instance, oh, I've got all these dependencies and I'm going to install them for you. And the next thing you know, oh my goodness, what have you done? You have completely destroyed my system. And now when I'm trying to recompile something, it's saying that all my libraries are hosed and that there are dual versions and nothing matches. And I had to rebuild, like I said, Perl, rebuild Python a couple times. In fact, I've been trying to do some more Python programming and to learn some more about that. And so I wanted, I believe it's the TK inter for TK interface, so that I could use idle when I was going through some of this. And it was saying that it was not available. Now I know I installed the TK libraries. And I went back to LFS and I'm looking at everything and saying, I know I installed this, so what's up with it? And then I read a small print at the end of Python, for instance, where it says, if you want the TK libraries, then you have to recompile Python after you install the TK libraries. Well, guess what? When you go through the installation of LFS or BLFS for Python, you install Python first, and then TCL and TK are towards the end of that chapter. That doesn't make sense to me. They really should have put TCL and TK at the top of that chapter with Python being after it so that it would go ahead. Because once you've built those two libraries, Python will build the GUI interface for idle and the TK inter modules and such, and they will work. But because I did that incorrectly or in the incorrect order, it wasn't functioning. It took me a little bit to figure that out. I also found out because if you use Python 2, When you test it, tkinter has a capital T when you want to use the module, whereas Python 3 tkinter for TK interface is all lowercase. Well, when I was testing it, I was just using all lowercase because that's what it did for Python 3, and Python 2 kept failing on me. So frustrations, abound. It took me a little bit before I found an article that says, hey, that's your problem, DOS. You need to change that out. So did so. It works great, functions very well. I really haven't had much problems, and I have had my little things here and there. I have built a couple kernels. I am currently, let's see here, if we look, I am currently running 4976. I did downgrade because I believe it initially installed with 412 on the kernel, and I was getting some kernel panics here and there. I was getting some other issues, and I figured, well, 4976 is what Gen 2 had me downgrade to for a more stable, so I decided I'll download that vanilla kernel from the kernels org and install it. I think I talked about that, and it's been running really well. I've only had my uptime for 10 hours. That's mainly because for some strange reason, I was doing some things and bouncing back and forth between a USB sound headset and a 3.5 millimeter headset. And my sound suddenly stopped, or at least when I went to control volumes, they weren't there. So a reboot fixed it, and I was good to go. I probably did something with all the different finaglings that I've been doing. Uh, RAM usage is still very light with LFS, but what do you expect? You've got the bare bones. You don't have an automated system that's constantly grabbing every little thing and pulling it in. I just got the bare system that I installed from source code only and have it running. Now, a lot of my disk space is being used. This is 120 gig SSD, and I have about 51.5 gigs free. And you're thinking, my goodness, you're using like 50 gigs of data space. Most of that is files for source code plus. As I mentioned a few videos back, I have found the best resource for when you're looking for code to compile for this is to go into my Gen 2 repositories to the dist files. So I have actually duplicated my dist files directory from my Gen 2 onto here, so it's a quick, easy, oh, I need this package, I'm not finding it very quickly through LFS or BLFS, let's go in my dist files and see if they have a package that's named that, and because that's what it's saying it needs for a dependency, because so much of what I wanted to build, it's not in LFS, so I've got to figure it out myself. And it's definitely, I say the documentation for LFS is great, but that's only if you stick within their boundary of what they have chosen to document. And when you do that, everything is perfect. When you go outside of that, like I wanted to use Mumble, I wanted to set up Excel. When I say Excel, I'm not saying Microsoft Excel. By no means. I think I showed you guys this the other day. If I go to like there and it is an X, it's EXAILE. This is a music player. I think I showed this to you guys last week because I like using this Python-based music player for all my music. I'd really like being able to go into the LibriVox plugin. Now I had to change and add some or fix I called it a small bug in the code because the only way you could search with LibriVox was to be able to put a caret in front of your search result and then start typing. Now I think I have mine set up so that you can search by author instead of title. And you can see, for instance, if you look up Baum for Frank L. Baum, he's one of my favorites when it comes to things like the Wizard of Oz series, and I've read all of the Oz books. I love his Oz series. Or if you were to look for, say, H.G. Wells, you can search in there and you can see all of the books by LibriVox for H.G. Wells. Now, LibriVox, if you don't know, is a public service of volunteers who read books that are in the public domain, and then they put them at the LibriVox.org website so that you can download them, stream them, or listen to them. So I love this because when I want to go and I just want to listen to a book, it doesn't matter really. As long as I've got my Excel program, for instance, say I'm listening to the Time Machine, I can go in here and it should load the chapters here in a moment. And you can choose then chapter one, chapter two. It looks like they're probably part one and part two. Now that's one thing I have noticed too is sometimes if there is a part one and part two, it doesn't list that. It just has it here, and that is a limitation in the LibriVox plugin I have found, which is why I'm trying to learn some more Python because I figured if I can use the LibriVox API, then I could build my own Linux interface that goes to the website. Now you say, Dawson, you could go to the website and just do all this. Yes, I know, but I think it would be so much cooler to have an application in Linux that did it for me. And so I really want to build that. And I really want to see if I can get that working. So, when you have a practical reason for learning coding, that's much better than just learning coding for the sake of learning how to code. My own personal thoughts. Plus, if you don't use it, you forget it, and that's never any good. But any which way, this is one of my favorite music things. It's lightweight, it works really well as long as you've got all your Python set up properly. And it did take me a little bit to get running, but afterwards it was pretty good. So you say, hey, Dos, we haven't seen your face yet in this video. Well, yeah, I figured, you guys are probably tired of looking at me. I decided maybe I just didn't really need to do that right now. It is still working, everything's still functioning. Yeah, I did change my little wallpaper. Now I got this background from just doing searches on the internet for Linux wallpapers, and it had the Linux here, and I added them from scratch. I also, last time you might have noticed, I had the i3WM logo there, and I kind of customized it. I put a little tattoo of DOS on his side over here. Yeah, anyway, that's the best I can do. I am not very good when it comes to graphic artistry or being very creative for that matter. But I just wanted to share with you that Linux from scratch is still working very well. Everything is functioning very well. This has been a very stable and wonderful experience. And honestly, I hate thinking about going on and moving on to something else because it's been so much fun. Now, people have asked me, are you changing from Gen 2 to LFS DOS? I was like, no, no, by no means no. In fact, I just did a Gen 2 update. I figured now's a good time to do an update on Gen 2, 240 packages, by the way, this weekend, because it's been a couple weeks since I've even touched my Gen 2 laptop. So I let that go through and everything went very well. Now I have thought about doing a dual boot with this particular system. I have thought about maybe putting Slackware on a 30 gig partition and trying that out. And I've also thought about maybe just for fun, rebuilding Gen 2 on this laptop in a second partition with a dual boot of LFS on the primary and Gen 2 on the secondary. But I kind of feel like, do I really want to do that? It would be interesting to do that. I think I could easily accomplish it. Uh, we'll see. I'll think about it. But so far, Linux from scratch has been lots of fun, works very well. Have been some hiccups here and there, but if you're patient, you do your research, you can always figure out a lot of your answers. So if it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you enjoy it. Try Linux from scratch someday. Don't be afraid of it. Take it a little bite at a time, a chapter at a time. Your best bet is to get your basic tools built and get yourself so that you can chroot into your partition with all the permissions set. And then once you get to that point, you can take your time just take a little bit here, a little bit there, and don't worry that if it takes you a week or two to complete it. And then when you're done, go from LFS to BLFS and see if you can get your GUI of choice to install. Now, granted, my GUI of choice was i3, and I had to learn it and figure it out on my own, but so far, everything has been really nice. It has not come very easily. It has not been a cakewalk. It has taken some struggle, it has taken some toiling and research and really digging to figure a lot of things out, but I really feel that sense of accomplishment at the end of it. And I've already said my outro, so thanks, guys. Bye.